Yeah.
Bad
Let's not get Bill into trouble.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So this meeting is being recorded on our live YouTube NWSOFA.org website. If you do not want to have your faces seen on the video, please turn off your video. Otherwise, we'd love to see you on. So, Marilyn, it is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. Enjoy your game. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. I hope we got some shout outs in the chat as far as where you're at, where you're coming in from. From Clinton, we got Marilyn from Clinton, Schaunsburg, Nikki. Got New Jersey in the house, Minnesota, North Carolina, Illinois. Yes, this meeting will be recording. It's recording right now. Chicago, Rose City, Portland. All right. Thank you very much. I'm glad to see so many people from different places. Florida, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Indiana, Minnesota, Iowa. Wow, that's amazing. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Okay, so welcome to the NWSOFA Cultural Civics History and Resilience for the 21st and the 21st century. My name is Marilyn, and I'll be your moderator for this evening. If you haven't already, which you have, most of you, still keep giving us your shout outs of where you're coming from. Happy Indigenous Day for those that are celebrating it, to all the Native Americans. Tonight in the chat box, we will have Miss Debbie and Miss Beth. So I am going to ask you all to please be kind in the comments. We're all getting through this, and we all have to work as a community. So, I'm hoping to provide some great information and that you'll be able to stick around and watch all of it. So if you have questions, we're going to ask you to put them in the chat box and put in caps question and then your question after that. And Debbie will be able to take those questions, and we'll get to those at the end of tonight's seminar. Okay, then let's get started. I think we've got we're still letting people in, Debbie and
Yes.
Beth. Okay, so let's.
Hey, Hori.
Beth, if you could do me a favor and watch for anybody who needs to be admitted so that I may watch for questions in the event they come up.
All right, fantastic. So we have a great lineup tonight. We're actually doing kind of a new format. We're going to have two different segments. We're going to have Mr. Boot Money and Larry. They're going to do our second half, but in our first half, we have a guest from Portland. He has been on CNN, NPR, and BBC. He's an award-winning teacher with research areas in hate crime and hate groups. I'd like to welcome author and sociologist, extremist scholar, and resistance training strategist, Dr. Randall Blazak. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Marilyn. Thanks for the invite and the opportunity to talk to this amazing collection of people from all over the place. So I'm in Portland, Oregon, which goes by many nicknames. We're the Rose City, we're Stumptown. We've recently been renamed by our president, War-Ravaged Hellhole, or Hellscape, excuse me. I want to get the president right. And so Portland is certainly in the news at the moment, as you probably know, along with Chicago. We're one of the two cities where he is trying to shoehorn in the National Guard, and that is tied up in the courts right now. Right now, the Ninth District is reviewing the case, and the reason the president wants to send the National Guard, well, there's a lot of reasons. He doesn't like the Pacific Northwest. He doesn't like Oregon. He doesn't like our senators, who have been kind of a thorn in his side. But he especially doesn't like the protests that have been happening in front of the ICE building pretty much all year, every single day, 24 hours a day. And I'd love to talk a little bit about what's happening down there, because part of what I've been doing is being a presence down there, live streaming it, working on nonviolent de-escalation strategies. And there's my town. That's actually, there we go. There we go. There was some video I shot yesterday, it looks like. There has been a lot of attention paid to this one block. It's sort of it's about 100 feet. It's not even 100 yards. It's about 100 feet of city property, not downtown. There I am, not downtown, coming straight from a de-escalation training, very appropriate. And I would guess that 99% of Portlanders could not find where the ICE building is. It's in such a weird remote location, but it has been portrayed by the president as sort of linked to the 2020 protest. I think he saw a TikTok or a Fox News report about Portland that played footage from our 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, and in his, what I like to refer to as his syphilitic brain, could not tell 2020 from 2025, and was convinced that Portland was, a nonstop rioting. And in fact, it's a relatively small little spot. In fact, one of the things that made this exciting yesterday is there was a Dixieland jazz band playing out front. And then we had what's known as the World Naked Bike Ride by in a naked protest, which is very Portland, riding in 45-degree weather while it's pouring rain. Hardy souls up here. So I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what I bring to this analysis about and how Portland is a part of it. So I thought I'd start. Should I just start? I just start talking. I'm a professor, so I just go into mode. So should I just wait for you to say a few words, Marilyn, or do we want me?
I was just going to ask you if there's a difference between what was happening during the first time that he was in office as opposed to this time.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, 2020 was a different animal, right? We were in lockdown. It was during COVID. So a lot of people were not working and sitting in front of their laptops or their phones, seeing the image over and over again of George Floyd being murdered. And Portland has a certain history of protest. And so we stepped into that, and it was over 100 days of sustained protest in front of the courthouse and a couple other parts of the city. And of course, those protests were targeting primarily the issue of police interaction with the African-American community. So the police were the target. When Trump was the president then, and he at a certain point sent in the federal guard, DHS and guard, the federal police, and things escalated very quickly. More people came out because it looked like, we had this invading army in our city, and things went off the rails, and some of it got kind of violent. And we also had outsiders coming in from rural areas who were sort of pro-Trump people, who were bringing guns to the situation. So it got bad. There were 2 people who were killed, and it was a lesson on how not to do protests. So 2025 is different because we don't have the lockdown, but we have a different dynamic. So one of the things that I'm hoping to talk about this a little bit is our relationship with the local police. The local police has positioned itself against the federal police. The local police, in a way, has made a point of protecting the protesters, which is very different than 2025, when the slogan was ACAB, all cops are bastards. Now we have this weird mediating force of the local police department, and a police chief who's been fairly vocal about, he's going to make sure these protesters have their First Amendment rights. So it's a different dynamic. It's also a different threat level. 2020 certainly was somewhat about Trump. There was a concern, but he was surrounded by people who had actually read the Constitution, and now he's surrounded by the Stephen Miller acolytes who just want to give him absolute power. So we are now having a legitimate anti-fascist movement in the streets of America, including Chicago and Memphis, and most certainly in Portland.
Well, I know that he's claimed that you guys were insurrectionists. Are you guys worried about him actually invoking the Insurrection Act?
Yes.
At all?
Yeah. I mean, it's a strange thing, because the National Guard are our neighbors. They are people who are either Oregonians or they're from other states. They're citizen soldiers. They're college students and people who are working at jobs and expect to be deployed at national disasters and foreign conflicts, not to raise their rifles against Americans. So they are also in a rough position because they are probably going to be asked to follow illegal orders. And the I'm just following orders thing didn't hold up very well in the Nuremberg trials, and they're going to be put in the really horrible position of having to decide, do I follow these orders? And of course, we're concerned about a Kent State. We're concerned about agitators. We've had one of the things that we've had at ICE is, especially since Trump kind of declared war on Portland, and that's the language that I use. MAGA people coming down. We've always had sort of conservative bloggers and media people showing up, and then they get some footage and they sell it to Fox News or CNN. I've seen some of it on CNN. But we now have sort of flag-waving, Charlie Kirk banner carrying right-wing acolytes who have come down to create conflict. Some of those have pretended to be left-wing activists or dressed as what they think of as Antifa. And try to cause problems. So we're worried that those people will do something and it'll get blamed on the protests. And so let me say this right off the bat. I've been going down since June, so I'm now in my 5th month of hanging out with these folks. I'm an ethnographer as a sociologist, so the way I do research is hang out with people. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about my background in this work. But I've only seen nonviolence. I've only seen the protesters really, there's a lot of screaming and yelling, which doesn't seem peaceful to a lot of people, especially the people that live in the neighborhood. But there has never been an incidence of violence. And if there was something that looked like it, it turned out it was someone who was from outside the group, coming down to cause some problems and have it blamed on people to give Fox News their little news clip. So there is a lot of concern. There is a lot of concern because it feels like if the Ninth Circuit Court upholds the stay and says no National Guard on the streets of Portland, he's going to call in for the Insurrection Act, and then we're going to get him anyway, and that is going to create a recipe for disaster. But we're hoping that the message of nonviolent protest that has dominated this thing, including yesterday with dancing sharks and unicorns in the streets of Portland between the naked bike riders, that will be the norm, and we'll continue to do this. But there are multiple players at work, including these sort of right-wing people who come in from out of town who want to disrupt things and make things less joyous. So yeah, it's a very combustible little situation down there on that one block.
Yeah, I do want to get to your past, but really quick, since we're talking about the protests, if you can give us some suggestions, because we have No Kings coming up on October 18th, right, which is this Saturday.
Yes.
Can you give us some suggestions on de-escalating?
Sure. Oh yeah, that's a big thing. Yeah, I mean, de-escalate. So the first thing about de-escalation, I mean, we just did a 2-hour de-escalation training yesterday. So I can give you the quick version of it, which is recognizing that when people get in an emotional state, sometimes the little devil on their shoulder drives the bus instead of the little angel on their shoulder. We get what's called the amygdala part of our brain. We get kind of hyper aroused, and sometimes people make bad decisions. People, I mean, the parallel is road rage. The most calm person, Zen person in the world, who's doing the Calm app meditation, in the morning, gets stuck in traffic and wants to murder somebody. I mean, I've been there, believe me. And you make a decision that you later regret. So we sort of recognize that people are going to be in a heightened emotional state, especially if they're counter protesters, and we try to get in front of people to help them bring the emotional level down, to sort of take a breath, do a breathing exercise, or just sort of walk away. And so we know the natural inclination is to fight. Somebody shows up with a Make America Great hat again, standing in front of the No King protesters. There's going to be people, lizard brain is triggered, and I'm going to want to tell them, about Jeffrey Epstein, or I'm going to want to go down that rabbit hole with them, which accomplishes absolutely nothing, and then it just brings the tension level up. So the de-escalators are the main goal, is to kind of bring people out of that emotional state and recognize that debate is for another day.
Oh, tell us a little bit about your past. I know some of it, but the rest of them don't. I
My
found it
life
very
is an open
intriguing
book.
that you did not get caught up in that, but fill the rest of us in on that.
Yeah, I grew up. I think our sort of personal stories are important. I grew up in a town outside of Atlanta called Stone Mountain. Stone Mountain is famous because it's mentioned in Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech when he says, "Let freedom ring from the hills and molehills of Mississippi and from Stone Mountain in Georgia." And the reason he mentioned my podunk little town is it's the birthplace of the modern Ku Klux Klan in 1915, Thanksgiving night, 1915. That's where the modern Klan was born. But started by a guy who saw the movie Birth of a Nation about the 1860s Klan and said, that looks like a good idea. And he was kind of like a Trump of his time. He was sort of a con man, always trying to find a way to make a quick buck. And he saw this new thing called a movie about this, this group called the Ku Klux Klan. And he started the Klan in my little town. And he burned a cross because he saw it in the movie. The first cross burning by the Klan was because it was in the movie. The Klan, the original 1860s Klan, never burned crosses. It was just something that was created by D.W. Griffith for the film. He saw it in the film, and it started, 100 years of terror in my little town. So I grew up around those folks. And because I was a kid, a white kid, I thought it was completely normal. They would march on Labor Day, and the rhetoric, about Black Atlanta being a dangerous place and stay out of the city. And, I heard all that growing up and thought it was quite normal. And I had friends whose fathers were in the Klan. And then I went to a place called college. Went to this strange place. I went to a great university, Emory University. It's where CDC is, so it's a little bit in the news these days. And took a sociology class that we called the Everything You Know Is Wrong class. And it sort of turned my head around. And I decided, oh, I see how racism works and how it worked on me. And so I decided to make that the focus of my scholarship. So as a graduate student, I spent about 5 years undercover in various white supremacist movements in the United States and Europe, including going to Klan rallies, hanging out with a lot of racist skinheads, interviewing Nazis in Berlin, neo-Nazis in Berlin, to try to really understand why that mentality resonates with people so well, and just sort of to connect it to the future. When Charlottesville happened, 2017, people might remember that was the Unite the Right rally, in which white supremacists were chanting with tiki torches, "You will not replace us, Jews will not replace us." And there was a anti-racist protester named Heather Heyer who was killed by one of the neo-Nazis driving his car into a crowd. And Donald Trump went on TV to say something about it. And he said, there are fine people on both sides. So I'm hoping people remember that illustrious moment. It seems pale in comparison to what's going on now, but it was a pretty big story. And I got dragged onto CNN to talk about, white supremacist groups and things like that. And the last thing, and it was Ana Cabrera, who's now on MSNBC, but the last thing that she asked me, she said, Dr. Blazak, if you could be Donald Trump's speechwriter, what would you have him say? And I wanted to laugh because who am I to be putting words in the president's mouth? But it was a strange recognition that my research that was started studying teenage skinheads was now helping to explain something that was a mainstream political ideology that had gone from very marginal. We sort of make fun of the hillbilly Klansmen, and now it's in the White House. So that's a short version of this journey I've been on to do this work.
So can you give us any clues as to why so many people, I mean, right now, Trump is at a 44% approval rating. To me, that's still pretty high. We're in a shutdown and he's still at 44%. Yeah. Can you give us any clue as to why he appeals to so many Americans?
Yeah,
and even the states.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of theories out there, and there are lots of pieces to it. But the main one, I'm a sociologist, so I'm going to draw upon our rich canon of theory. There's this theorist named Emile Durkheim, this French sociologist in the 1890s, who did a study on suicide, and he coined this term called anomie, ANOMIE, the sense of normlessness. When there's a lot of change, people sort of lose their tethering. So he was talking about Europe when they were moving from monarchy to democracy and from rural to urban and from agrarian to industrial. There was a lot of change happening after centuries of things being pretty much the same for centuries. So that anomie drove the suicide rate. And we've, in the last 60 years, have gone through so much change. We've gone through change in terms of the roles of women. Right, it used to be the man was the king of the castle. Now there are more women working than men, which is a big factor in the appeal to Trump. Is this hypermasculinity? The shrinking of the piece of the pie that's WASP, that's white Anglo-Saxon. Right, we're becoming a much more diverse society. I always tell my students, you know, go watch this old show called Leave It to Beaver, or Father Knows Best, and mark the diversity that you see. You don't see anything, right? Mom's got dinner on the table at 6 o'clock. There might be an Asian guy working at a laundromat or something, and that's about it. So we've gone through that. In sexual orientation, those shows, there were no gay characters on those shows. Although in Leave It to Beaver, Wally, the brother, had a friend named Eddie Haskell, and they would always go mess around. So now I'm thinking differently about maybe there was a gay subtext on the Beaver. But, you know, in growing up in Stone Mountain, Georgia, we knew there were gay people. They lived in San Francisco. There certainly were no gay people in Stone Mountain, Georgia. So there's been change there, including with transgender people. That's been a huge change over the last 10 years. And then on top of that, we've got the technological change, the fact that this, you know, there's more computer power here than was launched up into space on the Pioneer spaceship in the 70s. We have this amazing constant change. And then behind that, which is a really big one, is the economy, the way the economy has changed. 60 years ago, most Americans who weren't working for the federal government worked for General Motors and had a union job with a pension and health care. And they could buy a house and send their kid to college. Like, that's all gone. So we've gone through this incredible rapid change in a short period of time. And it's going to make us a little bit nostalgic for the days of Leave It to Beaver. You know, make America 1955 again. And when Trump was asked by CNN when he was first running for office, you know, you got the slogan, Make America Great Again. So you're saying it's not great, when was it great? And he said 1950. And for a lot of, you know, that may be, I mean, when I hear 1950, I hear, yeah, that's when, you know, Americans belonged to unions and we were taxing the crap out of rich people. But a lot of people heard that as like, oh yeah, that's peak of Jim Crow. That's before gay rights, before the feminist movement, you know, and that's when a man was a man. And so this anomie that Durkheim talked about in the 1890s is something that we are experiencing, you know, immensely now because of all this rapid change. So somebody gives you this nostalgic image of the past and says, I'm going to take you back to where you didn't have to worry about pronouns, and it's going to resonate with a lot of people. And I think underlying all the other things, the cult of personality, and Trump represents every man, even though he's a, you know, a billionaire and all this rhetoric. I mean, I think behind it, it's that very human emotion and to be nostalgic for a time when things made more sense. And for my students, they don't think they'll ever buy a house. They don't think they'll ever, you know, own their own home. That's all things the previous generation. So if somebody's saying, I'm going to take you back to the day when you could buy a house, of course you're going to get my attention.
Couple more minutes. We discussed, there's a couple of people on here. Jim is on here. They go to different meetings. They talk to MAGA Republicans, because Republicans are not the same as MAGA these days. They're, to me, so I call them MAGA Republicans along with a number of other people. Holidays are about to come up. Some of these family members are part of that. What do you think of how should they address them in order to try to have a pleasant holiday with their family and friends?
I'm so glad you asked that, because I'm doing a big workshop tomorrow about exactly this topic. And it's entitled, I wanted to title it, The Holidays Are Coming. Be ready to de-escalate. You know, like the winter is coming thing from Game of Thrones. The holidays are coming. Winter is coming. Like, get ready. Well, the good news is, and this is the good news, we are told how divided we are. We're constantly told that we're just polarized and we're on the brink of civil war and blah, 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 blah. When you look at the surveys around broad issues like values, caring about democracy, caring about privacy, caring about education, caring about health, caring about children. People are pretty much on the same page. And even when you look at some of the main issues that we talk about today, like digital privacy, ICE tactics, tariffs. I mean, people tend to actually be more in the middle. Gay rights. You know, we are not like brother versus brother civil war 1861. Like that's this narrative that keeps being shoved down our throats every time we have a map that where half the states are red and half the states are blue. We're all varying shades of purple. So one of the things that we know about political civility is there was a great study that was done at Gonzaga University over in Washington. And what it found was if you have people and you say, okay, you're on opposite sides of, let's say, the abortion debate, you're pro-choice and you're pro-life, have a conversation. They start off arguing. But if you say, hey, you're on different sides of the issue, but I want you to find something that you have in common that you like the Gonzaga basketball team or Taylor Swift or whatever it is, that you have a conversation about the thing that you have in common. And then you talk about the thing that divides you. Those conversations are completely different because they've established a bond and a commonality instead of coming in as opposites. So what I would say, when it comes to the holidays, first talk about politics. We need to talk about politics. Like we really need to talk about what's happening in the country. But put that around dessert. Like get to the other things first. Talk about your crazy Aunt Lisa and talk about, homecoming and how the kids are doing. And then, then when sort of some connections have been developed, then you can have a much more civil conversation.
Thank you. So where can people find you?
Okay. Well, I'm all over the place. I'm all over the place. I mean, randyblizak.com is my work website. And I'm going to be doing some sociology of fascism seminars later this fall there. But my main way to connect with me is on Instagram. That's my thing these days. I have become, you ready for this? An influencer. I don't know what that means. I don't know. I'm too young. My little daughter has to explain it to me. But I'm on Instagram at blazakr. And I do daily reports about what's happening in this country through a sociological lens. And I'm also sort of reporting from the ICE protest almost nightly. So that's where to find me, blazakr on Instagram.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I want to hear your tag because that is something that I love hearing off of your Instagram. You always have a tag at the end.
Did you want to read it? Well, you were showing an image earlier from yesterday. I have that. Well, let me pull this up. Let's see if I can do this real quick, and then you can see. I did a great little interview with the Jack the Chicken guy yesterday. Come on.
People, here we are. How's it going, everybody? I'm coming from our de-escalation training. We have music on the streets of Portland. Jack, hey, Jack. I let all these people in my room. Think about this. Yeah, it's great. I really like this. The more people, the better.
That's Jack. He has been a constant presence down there and has been to our de-escalation training and he's using his chicken suit to kind of make fun of Trump's narrative that Portland is full of violent Antifa domestic terrorists. So that's what you'll find on my Instagram if you come by.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. You are a wealth of information.
Yeah. And if I get to say one thing and leaving is this is a time to have, I know politics is not polite conversation, all the stuff that we're not supposed to talk about, but this is a time to talk about politics. And I would encourage people to be good messengers that there is a real risk of losing our nation and having that conversation with people and bringing them on board in whatever level they feel comfortable. Please, you're doing good stuff just by meeting on a Monday night. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much.
And Marilyn, we have a few questions. I don't know if we would like to take them.
We can take one because we have to get on to the next one. So
I'll be brief.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, first one that came in is from Nancy. Question, based on what is happening in the U.S. under this administration, can the people reinstate democracy?
Oh, it had to be a simple question that I had to answer briefly. Well, the big answer is yes. We're not dead yet, to quote Monty Python, and where the energy really has to be is in getting people excited about voting, and not only excited about voting because a lot of people sat out the last election because of Gaza or whatever, but really being vigilant that these are fair and free elections. That people need to be poll workers. People need to really really put their shoulder to the wheel to make sure that we have a good election next year. And I think we can wrestle the world from fools, as Patti Smith once said.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
For joining us. We're gonna let you go because we know you got daddy duty tonight.
She snuck in behind me. She's like, Dad, why are you on Zoom? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Peace and welcome to the resistance.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Stay safe. Okay, so just a reminder, don't forget to put those Q&A questions in there for our next segment because we have two of our regulars that we normally have on Coffee and Conversation in the morning. We have Columbus Larry, who was born in a rural Ohio and raised on a farm in a Republican family. In the 80s, he learned how to fly, and in the 90s, he taught flying and flew for a construction company. It was during that time in the year of 1992, George Bush was losing popularity, and he found Clinton to be more of a thinker. So that was his turnaround. And his interests include history, physics, science in general, and political curiosity. We also have Mr. Boot Money. A majority of us know him, and even it doesn't surprise me when he gave me part of his bio here is he was heavily influenced by rock and roll. I'm going to have to ask him what is his favorite rock and roll band. Boot would have taught U.S. history, and I'm going to rat you out because you said this on one of our Coffee and Conversations in the 60s and 70s, but he knew it wouldn't pay the bills. So but Boot eventually questioned how much truth is in the books and mythologies and used to pump up national prestigiousness. Although he's held various employments, he has worked an ITSM consultant for Indian companies in California. Boot Money was blue and still is. And Columbus Larry was red, but now he is blue. And they both arrived to the same page along with taking different paths. Tonight, their love of history comes together and we get to discuss that. So I'd like to start with Columbus Larry. So Mr. Larry, tell us about Columbus, Ohio. How did it get its name, and did you guys celebrate today, being that it is Columbus Day?
As it turns out, I did not. It is Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, but Columbus, it started with, if you'll see on my map there, you'll see a little horizontal sliver in the center. Columbus is about in that area, and that was called refugee land, where the Virginia and the Virginia Military District got that land to give to Canadians and British loyalists that fought for the colonists, and so that became. And I didn't know that because Refugee Road runs all the way through there, and I never knew the origin of Refugee Road. And but anyway, the State House is built there. Also in that area is Columbus was a latter thing. The first settlement in that area was Franklinton, and they named that after Franklin or Benjamin Franklin. And it was along the west side of the Scioto River. They were located at the confluence of the Scioto and the Olentangy. And they picked that because it was good farmland. But unfortunately, because of the river, it flooded. So when they decided to build a capital for the state of Ohio, they decided to build it in Columbus, or they named Columbus and built the town there for the capital. And it is on the other side of the river on the high ground. So That's how it got there. The name was an interesting thing. It was I didn't know why it was named Columbus, but apparently it was a lawmaker from early days, and he also owned a bar in Franklinton. And he chose Columbus because he, for whatever reason, admired.
Wait a minute. Hey, Larry,
Yeah, yeah.
was Columbus ever near Columbus, Ohio?
There are no reports of Columbus ever setting in a place close to Columbus, Ohio, or
Or
probably
any
Columbus.
place in North America for that matter. So why the heck is Columbus, Ohio named after? When was it named?
It was 18. Columbus was named in 1812 or thereabouts. No, about 18. Yeah, 1812ish. Yeah,
That's like 600 years afterwards.
yeah. No, well, it's 400 years afterwards. Yeah. So, but
Wait a
anyway,
minute. Wait a minute.
yeah.
Marilyn, I call for a ruling. Is it?
Don't drag me into this.
I'm terrible at arithmetic, you know? That's what kept me down all my life.
I'm going to get to something that will bring the date into focus.
Okay, fire away.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on. It's named Columbus. Time goes on, and I was born in 1952. Lived 40 miles north on a little farm, and on a clear, clear, clear day that we used to have a long, long time ago, you could see the only tall building in Columbus, and it was the AIU building, or the Lincoln Levesque Tower. But they didn't start building up. They always had an inferiority complex. They thought of themselves, and they thought others thought of them as a cow town. And so they were always trying to do something in my lifetime that would
Well,
bring
hey,
notoriety
Larry,
to
what
Columbus.
about the statues, though? Tell me about that one, because I
Okay.
not clear on what you were telling us.
Okay, well, the statue that the Italian community in Columbus, they wanted to honor somebody. It's named after Columbus. They decided to put a statue up. Now, it turns out that George Floyd may have killed Columbus because in the late 1900s, people started thinking differently about history, and they didn't like the Columbus Day thing, and they had protests and whatnot. And in 1991 they brought a thing here called a Mariflora. It was a big flower show, and the whole thing was that would bring notoriety to Columbus from around the world. And during that, they wanted to also build a replica Indian village, and the natives did not like that idea, and they had hunger protests on Columbus Day, fasts on Columbus Day for years, and after George Floyd's murder, there were protests for like 3 months in the year, 3 months out of the summer that year, and the petitions to change the name of Columbus, get rid of the statue, and we also had a replica of Santa Maria in the river, and all those things are gone now. But you're lucky. Today's your lucky day. On the news tonight, the Italian community, the Italian society, it says it's time to bring the statue back, and they supposedly have a plan for a 5-acre park to relocate the statue and maybe put up a little bit more educational material about Columbus. So there's your statue story. It was gone. It's gone. They hauled it away, put it in a warehouse, and now they're trying to get it back.
To honor somebody who's never been in the city,
Yeah.
or even on the continent. I
Yeah.
don't get it. Where does that come from? Oh, wait a minute. I think I do get it.
I'm waiting to hear.
All right. I think it comes from the same place that had those first people say, no toy village for your entertainment. You know, it's
Yeah.
all this leftover. Larry, do you know that that was a very contested area at one time? That whole Ohio, in fact,
Oh, the Northwest Territory. Yes.
yeah. And do you know who had a claim on that?
Well, Spain,
Well, no,
France,
not Spain, dude. It
Britain.
was France originally, but then
Yeah. Yeah.
then the Brits fought a well, they weren't the Brits, they were the English, and they fought a war and took over that property, and George
Yeah.
Washington claimed it.
Yeah.
And it becomes important later on. But I mean, it's always been a highly contested area, and it was a highly civilized area before they decimated it.
Yeah, we were always taught in school about the French and Indian War, the War of 1812, the Revolutionary War, as if they were all something separate. But they were, in fact, just continuations of each one.
And they were all colonial,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, and
Speaking
they
of
were all
colonial,
there to protect a certain way of doing business and a certain type of economy.
Just
speaking of
take what you want.
colonial,
That's just sort of a late age observation that I made of American history, you know,
Yeah.
that see, there's a realization you come to. Maybe other people with press and ID might realize this, but to say, well, what was that all about? You know, and you look back and it becomes somewhat apparent that there's always been the same dynamic driving this portion of the continent, which is sort of important because there's a lot more to this continent, you know?
Yeah.
And as a result, they sort of split it up that property was sort of more important than what was on the property, unless
Oh,
it was
absolutely.
theirs,
Yeah.
you know? So that's
Yeah.
why they might not like you building false villages, Larry.
Yeah.
What other bad things have you guys been up to?
Mr. Boot Money,
Yeah.
can we get into colonialism and how it is reflected in the current state as far as the mentality and the behavior that is connected with the MAGA or MAGA Republicans?
Okay. Yeah. But here's something that you've got to understand is that there is a certain cycle that's in play. All right. I mean, I'm not spilling the beans on anything. It's pretty apparent. It's in every religious tradition. And um, I don't know, Marilyn, I'm losing a couple of words here, but that's what happens when you get at this end of the circle of life, you know? But part of the deal is that we're living in an area, in a place that began with the theft of property. All right. All of this area that Larry has up on his map was essentially stolen by different European groups for the reason, you know, was all over the place. But it sort of does start with Columbus, and we sort of still are dragging Columbus with us, and we don't need him anymore because we realize what's happened. And what's happened has been good, and what's happened has been bad. And sometimes it's been very bad, and sometimes it's been good, you know? I mean, that's just what's happened here. So, time out, Marilyn. You got to go to Larry.
Okay.
You know, I got Pennsylvania ginger ale.
Got it. Okay. Well, Mr. Larry, I am going
Yes.
to, if you don't mind, I actually have a video of JVL on the Bulwark, who sat down with Heather Cock Richardson to discuss conservatives and how they've changed throughout the history. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on it after it's been played. So here's a clip of Richardson defining conservatism and how President Abraham Lincoln, how he expressed what conservatism is.
Very good.
The United States doesn't start to use the term conservatism until after the Compromise of 1850. And part of the Compromise of 1850 says that northern states have to, regardless of their own state laws, have to return fugitive enslaved people to the American South. And the law is written in such a way that free Black people have like no rights at all. And a lot of people in the North who disagree either with the idea of enslavement or with the idea that the federal government should override their own laws start to say, no, we're not going to pay any attention to that part of the Compromise of 1850, to the Fugitive Slave Act. When that happens, Southern enslavers start to refer to those people, saying they're not going to pay attention to that law, as radicals, as they're not going to pay attention to law. They are radicals. The abolitionists begin to say, now, wait a minute, we're not radicals, we're conservatives, because we are standing on the Declaration of Independence. And that's the term that Abraham Lincoln picks up when he starts to call himself a conservative, as he does very dramatically at Cooper Union in New York. When he says, you're the radicals, we're the conservatives, what he is saying is we are standing on the principles of the Declaration of Independence. And it's on those terms that the concept of conservatism comes to the United States. And you often hear me saying that I am a Lincoln conservative, and that's what I'm talking about. I believe in the Declaration of Independence.
So when we had our discussion prior to this, there was this thing that between you and Boot Money, who were saying we on this call would be considered conservatives.
Absolutely. Yes. And I don't think that those, I'm not talking about MAGAs now, but well, MAGAs, that's a whole different story, but the GOP, they don't even know what conservative means. I used to fly for a guy, and we would fly all over the country for quarterly meetings and whatnot, and we'd always go to really fancy resorts, and he would always claim, well, we're conservative. And I said, no, if you're a conservative, you'd be staying at Super 8. but no, you stay at very expensive ones. And so my point I don't believe they even have a clue what conservative means, but basically it just means don't spend my money,
So let me ask you this question. Since you used to be a Republican, is that how you saw it, the way that Richardson described it? That description that you used?
No, I thought that everybody wanted to conserve the union. I thought everybody understood the democracy and the union and everything. But of course, when I grew up, money was a whole different thing back then. We lived in a poor county, and it was almost didn't matter. You voted in the county, you voted for personality, because there wasn't enough money for you to do any liberal things anyway. That was my belief at the time, So, but when you start going to Washington a lot and see how things are done, and you find out, and you're told over and over again, no, we're not. That's not a bribe. We just pay them. We have to pay them for FaceTime. Just to talk. You have to make the donation just to be able to talk and get some time with somebody. So they were giving money under false pretenses, but it worked in their mind.
Yeah, but you know what, Marilyn? you gotta put that conservative tag in a 19th century setting. And what HCR is saying is that Lincoln wanted stability, right? Lincoln was a very practical kind of frontier guy, get it done. And he was also a prisoner of whatever kind of thinking was prevalent by that time in our history, all right, and in our development as a human species. So when she says a Lincoln conservative, what she really means is that she's all in favor of a stable society. What is it going to take to make a society less volatile, like the one we happen to be in right now, and less likely to implode, like the one we're in now?
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's easy to get that term sort of mistaken and think, well, it's the same kind of mindset processing the word conservative as it was, when Lincoln was a Whig, okay? And the Whigs were essentially the English sort of conservatives in the early 1800s, But see, all of this stuff traces back. I mean, in reality, Lincoln would have done anything to avoid war. All right. So I think we got to look at that whole thing pretty closely to see what his reality was, and then watch how things sort of developed. Which brings us to Columbus, Ohio, Larry. Do you know does anybody know why Columbus was important for the colonials? Anybody ever wonder, he never set foot in this. Why are we celebrating that? And it goes back, believe it or not, to a guy named Pope Alexander VI in 1493. All right. At the time, there were only two European groups that had sailed out enough to find other land. All right. But they ran into a problem because they didn't know how morally they could take it. So they went to Pope Alexander and said, how can we decide that it's the right thing to do? Pope Alexander was named Rodrigo Borgia. He sort of came from a very interesting kind of family, if in case anybody's interested, So Alexander decides, I'm going to split the earth in half, and you guys can have this half, the Portuguese. You guys can have this half, the Spanish, and you can take anything that you find in the hands of anybody who's not Christian. There's a problem here in trying to understand that at this point in time, because in 1493, there was only one Christian, all right? It was the Catholic Church, all right? So that pretty much meant that if you were a European Christian, you could go out and ask somebody if they knew anything about it. They didn't. It's mine now. So it's sort of a sticky way of looking at life. And it's sort of dehumanized anybody who wasn't European. Gosh, where have we heard that before? And
So what
that's
happened?
part of the issue, I mean, think about it, Larry. What about it?
What happened in 30 years that made it okay for the Pilgrims to take the land?
Oh, well, they did it righteously, didn't they? I mean, the whole thing, if you look at it in a one particular way, which is unfortunately might be the way I look at it, the whole thing has been flim flam since the outset. And
Yeah.
it's been genocide on a status that really we got to review, because it very well could be happening in other places in other ways. It might even be happening to us if we look at it in another way and say, hey, this is economic genocide. They're wiping out classes of people. That's sort of a colonial deal. That's like, the mofos gave the first people blankets soaked in smallpox. Just it was the pesticide of the day. What kind of mofo thinks like that?
So
Anyway, Harry, take over, because
might that be
conversation better be drawn to a close, Marilyn, because we're going on.
but might that be considered the Citizens United of the day?
Yeah, I think so. But so this when the people in Columbus, Ohio, decided to remove the statue after everything that was known and publicized about George Floyd, do you think that was a point of awareness? Are we looking at maybe a new consciousness among people who probably haven't thought like that very much?
Absolutely, yeah. And
they
to make it better, I believe they took it down overnight in the cover of darkness.
Well, that's what they just did to Trump and his boyfriend out there in the lawn in the White House.
Yeah.
So I want to get into democracy not equaling equality. That was a discussion we also had. As far as, Dr. Blazak, he talked about the First Amendment right. We talked about the First Amendment right in the Constitution. I believe at one point in time, you both agreed that, well, at least I know that Boot Money did, that the First Amendment right was not really meant for the people. It was more for the government. Did I hear you correctly on that one, Mr. Boot Money?
I think if we look back on it, you'll see that the original fear of the people who wrote these laws, by the way, was not that you would lose individual rights, but that they would be threatened by a central authority. There was a big fear in the colonial population for an entirely different set of reasons about centralized government. And so a lot of the points in the first 10 amendments, which had to be negotiated, by the way, after they formed a government, not before, even though it was part and parcel of what supposedly all these revolutionaries fought for, you start to take a different look at things and realize that maybe somebody's been fiddling with the data. I don't know. What do you think, Elon?
Is it true?
It's talking to you, Mr. Larry.
Well, you know what? Here's what we have to understand here, is that this law was in place in 1491, all right? The first American colony isn't until, I think, 1620, somewhere around there, all right?
Yeah.
So there's 200 years there. So a lot of stuff is going down. And what it essentially does, all right, in Europe, leads to the Reformation. So now the original colonization, which carried the Catholic cross all over the place, is joined by a new Christianity, which is trying to absorb this enormous change in the idea of the individual. All right. That opening created a lot of different thoughts. Some of them weren't very popular in Europe, and they had to find other places to subsist and exist. And quite a few of them found that they'd take the risk. So
Yeah.
There's a Larry, what's that YouTube that you sent me on the East Coast stuff?
Oh, on the settlement by different groups?
Yeah, not by
Yeah.
different groups, by different
Locations,
interpretations of what the
communities.
Reformation meant
Yeah,
and how they tried to justify ownership of other human beings. Because it's irreconcilable if you go back to original Christian teaching. And it was irreconcilable up until 1493, which isn't all that bad long ago when you realize that,
yeah,
oh, what, hominids have been on 2 feet for 300,000 years? The
yeah,
planet is 4.5 billion years.
yeah.
So, yeah, there's been a lot of change absorbed. And I'm wondering if maybe sinking to Santa Maria and, coffining Christo there might be a bigger realization that colonization might not have left us a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
It did
so
leave us
let's
some good stuff, and we've made a lot more good stuff out of it. But
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
our relationships that it created are fraying. Sort of like, in biology, you see that organisms, as they cease to exist, are usually consumed sort of at the end of their lives, right?
Yeah,
By maggots.
yeah,
Well, look at the Republicans. They're being consumed by essentially social and political maggots at this point.
yeah.
The system is broken, but that doesn't mean it's over. That just means we got to sort of listen to Dr. Randall again. I mean, that dude had his shit together.
okay, let's get into the questions. So
Oh, I
Steph,
didn't mean that, Debbie. I didn't mean that.
Yes, you did.
so let's get into the questions, gentlemen. So Stephanie has a question. How have the changes in money in politics, PACs, and Citizens United changed the relationship between citizens and their representation?
No, no, didn't. That's always been part and parcel of the system. That's what the colonial portion is. That's how the system was designed from the beginning. All right. And the one we're under is not the beginning. All right. What this supposed revolution was, all right, and I come from the school of thought that says if you got a revolution that creates a body count, you just get more food replacement. You don't get change. And the very, very first question is you got to ask is what exactly changed for anybody after the American Revolution? Who benefited? That's a tough question, but we've got AI skills that are being shared among a large group of people that are going to help us understand that, yeah, learning the truth can be a little painful, but it is to an extent very liberating.
Larry, anything to add to that?
Just as the money flows upward, and just as with the revolution, the people who lived out on the prairie and farms and whatnot, they really didn't care too much. They knew or they may not have known, but their life wasn't going to be any different. They're still eking out a living. and they weren't paying taxes so much because it was the business people on the East Coast that were paying the tariffs and taxes. So, yeah, I had my older brother was in Thailand during the Vietnam War and talked about the people along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and he said, those people didn't necessarily care who was over them. They were going to live the same terrible life either way. If you're out here scratching a living out on a farm, it's not going to change if you're going from British to Patriot or vice versa. So, and I apologize for using the word patriot. They were revolutionaries, whatever you want to call them. So.
Okay, next question. How do you account for libertarians?
Libertarians?
Libertarians.
Right.
Don't touch
They're-
my stuff.
Okay.
Go ahead with mine.
No, but libertarians do have a point to some connection in what the original mission statement for the people, all right? The reason that we're given that we're even a nation now, okay? Supposedly it was done for the people, even though we see history that says it was probably broken down into thirds, and if the French hadn't beaten Cornwall at Yorktown, we'd be all speaking with British accents. I don't know. I'm trying to remember whether I got a C+ or a C- in that class, but I'm pretty sure if you AI it, you might be able to clear it up for us. Just a thought. Adrian hates when I say that, but
Well, it is
it's a bad habit. Part of my misspent youth.
That's part of.
Oh, hey, wait a minute. I got to tell you, this whole line of demarcation that they set up. All right, obviously it collapsed the minute that the Reformation broke out in 1517. All right, so not only do you have a collapse of these people that thought they owned it all, but you got a bunch of new guys who don't believe in the guy who set up the line, but they're willing to take the part that says you can take anything in sight if they're not Christian. So, we've got a problem with our belief system not matching what the control system did. All right. And there's a big problem. I think we see it with most of the Western religions that they can't resolve this. And it's not because they're wrong, it's because they stopped growing. I mean, the reality is, hey, Marilyn, did you post that the reading thing?
We are in the chat. Debbie has posted all the books that you guys have recommended, along with Dr. Blazak. There was a recommended list of books to read there. She also posted the full length of the video from the Bulwark. So if anybody wants to watch it, it's about 40 minutes long. And that's all the questions we have. So, gentlemen, thank you, Mr. Robert. I see you got 1619 going on there. That's all the question we have. I thank you for sharing your knowledge and your love of history. And thank you all for joining us this evening. It's been fantastic. Learning some stuff, seeing how many people we had. I appreciate you showing up. I also like to thank our people who were support on this, that being Debbie and Stephanie and Beth. You guys are wonderful. Thank you all so much. Everybody have a great evening and enjoy yourselves. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
We